Welcome back to the Arise interview, where we speak to the newsmakers as well as ordinary people doing extraordinary things around the world and featuring the voices at the heart of the stories. I'm Charles Aniagolu. Now, after many months of growing insecurity across Nigeria, the country's Independent National Electoral Commission, or INEC, is getting ready to face major tests as it conducts upcoming elections and by-elections. The big one this year is in November, governorship elections in Anambra state, and it comes after an upsurge of violence in the state, culminating in a major attack recently on INEC's headquarters there and the burning down of its collation center in the capital, Awka. Many vehicles that INEC officials use for their operations, as well as dozens of electricity generators, were also set alight. So what impact is this likely to have on the governorship elections there coming up 5 months from now?
You have insecurity or not, INEC should get prepared based on the time available for them. Otherwise, we will be running into anarchy. The party itself is not deterred by the present insecurity. The parties are preparing for the election. You cannot fold your hands and say that there is insecurity, and as such, you won't get prepared for the election.
The security challenges or the security threats, have not assumed the dimension as to prevent INEC from conducting an election. We are in June. And the elections the election is scheduled to come up in November. And presently, there is nothing stopping the various political parties from complying with the law and carrying out the exercises that will lead to the conduct of free, fair, transparent, and credible party primaries.
Looking to the near future, the Commission is preparing to conduct the remaining off-season end-of-tenure elections ahead of the 2023 general election. Already, activities listed in the timetable for the Anambra state governorship election are being implemented. So too are those of the FCT area council election holding on 12th February 2022.
And that's the chairman of the Electoral Commission there, Mahmood Yakubu. Well, for more on this, I'm joined now in the studio by one of the Nigerian Electoral Commission, INEC's resident electoral commissioners, Obo Effanga. Thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you.
First of all, just set out for us the extent of the damage to INEC facilities by these attacks, not just in Anambra State, but in other parts of Nigeria.
Well, since after the last general elections, we've experienced damage and destruction to some of our property across the country. Some states are more badly affected than others. But in the more recent months, we've had a lot of some offices burnt, local government offices, and then state offices of the Electoral Commission burnt and equipment destroyed in those places. I think the most worrisome one for us now is that of Anambra State, because there's election coming up in that state later this year. We are trying to see how much we can salvage what is left in each of those places. And before now, during the election, we've had instances where our facilities are affected, and in standalone elections like this, we are able to mobilize facilities from other states to use. If you remember, before the last election, governorship election in Anambra State, similar thing happened. The smart card readers were burnt. We had to source from nearby states to make sure that the elections went on.
And is that what you're planning to do for Anambra State, or is the level of attack on your facilities, has it so affected other states that it might actually be difficult in the time that you've got left to mobilize the kind of support and guarantee that this time it's not going to be attacked again?
Well, in terms of facilities, we can mobilize from other states enough to run the election in one state, in this case Anambra State. But the concerns would still be there about the environment generally, about the tension that is across the land and in that area. So we'll need to work with other agencies to ensure that this is handled as much as possible. Like we like stressing, when it comes to election, INEC is only coordinating. Election belongs to the entire society. So different agencies, different organs of government, different citizens and individuals have to play their part to ensure that it's a success.
Absolutely. We'll return to Anambra State in a moment, but by a timeline measure that was put out by the Premium Times newspaper, 41 INEC offices have been attacked in 14 states between February 2019 and May 2021 by armed gangs. Are all of them election-related violence, or are they because of protests that are unrelated to elections, or just the activities of thugs?
Well, I think we'd have to rely on the security agencies to determine what exactly led to that, if they're able to arrest some of the culprits, to know what. But some of those things may not necessarily be. So during the protests in the country last year that went out of hands, there were a couple of our offices that were burnt. We wouldn't say those were directly related to election or contest for position. So that happens. And we've also, long before now, we've had instances, an instance where our office was attacked because election was conducted, a local government election was conducted in a state that has nothing to do with INEC. But as far as people are concerned, election, when they hear election, it's INEC.
Yes.
And so they were dissatisfied with how that happened, and our office was attacked. But that was many years ago.
And I mean, according to that timeline of attacks, Imo State in the southeast topped the log with the most attacks during the last 2 years. Why do you think things are so bad for INEC there?
Well, it's like I said, one can't really tell why this happened unless there is a thorough investigation, right. And the investigation agencies have to identify that. One can only hazard a guess, but I wouldn't want to do that at this stage.
Right, that's perfectly understandable. But of course, the list, I think you touched on that earlier, doesn't include damage to facilities as a result of accidents such as fires, natural disasters like flooding or storms, burglary, that sort of thing. So when you add those, the picture looks even worse for INEC, doesn't it?
Well, there aren't so many of those other instances of accidents or flooding. I experienced one when I was a resident electoral commissioner in Edo State. The office was badly flooded. That was in 2017. They were able to handle that, and that was good enough time before the general election, so there wasn't a problem with that.
There are, of course, and I think, again, you touched on it briefly, beyond the damage to the buildings and the infrastructure that you use to conduct elections, there are also attacks on officials of INEC. I mean, there have been incidents of not only physical, but kidnappings, all that sort of thing. I mean, I expect that's quite a big worry for you as well.
Yes, it is. And like I said, not just about INEC now. It is a societal problem. So we have instances of violence across the land, of kidnappings across the land. Everybody should be worried about that. But we can also imagine that when the elections come closer, there's a possibility that that could also affect election officials. So it's a worry that we all have to address as Nigerians. Right,
but obviously it's a big concern because you work for INEC, and INEC people. I mean, it's related to the conduct of elections oftentimes, or to the process of trying to set up an election. So when that happens, not only does it hit Nigeria's democracy, because obviously if you can't conduct elections, then there's a problem. But it's a threat to you physically. I mean, you and people who work there.
Yes, it is. And we're trying the best we can to protect ourselves from that. And one of the things we keep saying is that we can't put personnel in harm's way simply because we want to conduct election. So we need to do a lot, not only as INEC, but Nigeria as a country the security agencies need to do a lot to ensure that this doesn't happen, and also to assure people that they can conveniently go out to participate in the election without being afraid of what might happen to them on election day.
Right, and whilst we're on the subject of insecurity, let me just bring our viewers this piece of news that bandits have invaded Federal Government Girls' College in Kebbi State and abducted an unknown or unspecified number of students in the process. So that's what we're hearing, and of course there'll be much more on that here on Arise News, but we're getting the information that bandits have invaded Federal Government Girls' College in Kebbi State, abducting an unspecified number of students. The Federal College is in Birnin Yauri. So that's what we're hearing. So that sort of buttresses the point that you were making, that this is a general problem of insecurity that we ought to be very concerned about. But why do you think that INEC and its facilities come under attack, even when there are no elections taking place?
Well, like I said, this is something that investigation would need to
but
reveal.
obviously,
but the point is that even when there is no election, INEC is still central to Nigeria's democracy. There are lots of activities that we are carrying out even before the election. We just finished with creating new polling units in the country, first time after 25 years. So at any given time, our operations are critical to Nigeria's democracy and development. So if somebody were interested in stopping that, then INEC would be a target for that.
Right, and let's return to Anambra State, where we started, because of course, as we mentioned, in the last month it's had its INEC headquarters attacked, the collation center burnt down, generators, I mean dozens of them, set alight. What impact is that attack likely to have on the governorship election that's coming up in November?
Well, that is putting pressure on INEC to do a lot. One, we'll need to renovate the office or think of an alternative place to use for that. And if you're talking about an alternative place, then you'll need to worry about getting the place secured, getting some facilities in the office that has been attacked already. So we have to manage with that while still trying to run with the timetable that we've already laid out for the conduct of the election. Yes, it's not the best of times, but we need to work harder to ensure that the goal is achieved of conducting election when it's due.
But at this point, you can't say whether you'll be able to do it. Because I mean, there are people, you heard the politicians and all that expressing concern, some of them.
Yeah, it's something we just have to do. And there are a lot of things that need to be done. It may mean mobilizing facilities and personnel from other areas to...
You're saying it may mean?
It would mean that,
right.
I mean, for instance, facilities have been destroyed there. And those are facilities we must use for election.
They're vital facilities.
So we have to get it from other states.
I mean, they destroyed generators. I understand they destroyed election materials as well.
Yes, but they won't be the sensitive election materials because those ones are not ready yet.
Yeah. Okay, but these are still things that need...
Yes, so generators can be replaced. We can
right.
move them from other states to do...
Okay, please stay with us. We want to talk with you some more. You're watching the Arise interview. Plenty more still ahead as we continue our chat about the issues that threaten the safe and proper conduct of elections in Nigeria. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Arise interview. I'm Charles Aniagolu. Now, in the past 2 years, according to a timeline published by the Premium Times newspaper, at least 41 offices of the Nigerian Electoral Commission, INEC, have been attacked by armed gangs. The attacks took place in 14 states between February 2019 and May 2021, with Imo State topping the log with the most attacks during the period under review. According to the chairman of INEC, Mahmood Yakubu, some of the attacks were related to election violence, while others were because of protests that were unrelated to elections and electioneering. and one of the Nigerian Electoral Commission, INEC's resident electoral commissioners. Obo Effanga is still with me in the studio. Thank you for staying with us. As we said, the next big election is in November. It's the Anambra state elections, and one of the big issues beyond the violence and the attacks and so on, that a lot of people are drawing attention to, particularly civil society groups, is the new Electoral Act, which has not yet been passed. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I actually thought that by now, whatever amendment to the Electoral Act would have been done with now by the National Assembly and signed off by the President, but that hasn't happened. It then means that we are left with what is in existence, which is what we use in conducting the previous elections. We had done some work with the Parliament, with the parliamentary committees on INEC. In the past, we had workshops together where we looked at some of those areas for amendment that were proposed, and we thought that we had finished on our own side. And I truly don't know why this hasn't been passed yet, but we just pray that it's passed early enough before the next sets of elections.
Yeah, we're talking about this with civil society people yesterday, and the point was made that, you know, it may well be related to COVID, because, I mean, they were supposed to do it last year, they couldn't. Then they moved it to March and they didn't pass it, and now they're talking about July. But how important is that Electoral Act to INEC?
Well, the elections we conduct are based on the Electoral Act, and whatever reform we want to see would have to be reflected in the Electoral Act. And so if that doesn't happen, then it means that we'll have to carry out the election based on the existing law.
Which is 2010.
Yes.
Right, and that's the one a lot of people have problems with, isn't it?
Yeah.
What are the...
But we've used this in the previous, the last few standalone elections, the one in Edo and in Ondo State, and we made the best of it.
Yeah.
So if people are satisfied...
The one in Edo State went quite well,
yes,
didn't it?
And,
yeah.
and in Ondo State.
Yeah.
We are trying the best we can given the laws we have to work with. So I think one of the things that helped in that of Edo and Ondo was the innovation we had, where there's a results portal that once the election is concluded, the results are uploaded to the portal. So that we would still continue to do that.
Right, but what are the provisions that are contained in this new amended act that are likely to improve the conduct of elections in Nigeria?
Well, because it's not yet out, we can't say this provision
right,
is
okay, I see what you
not.
mean.
Yeah.
But what would you like to see in it?
Well, there are lots of things. Okay, so one of the things that we looked at when we had the joint meeting with them, with the parliamentarians, was the need for primaries to be concluded early enough before the election, because we have part of the problems we have with election is that is the conduct of primaries by the political parties. So you may even end up having an election concluded, and then the disputes from the primaries conducted by the political parties are still ongoing, that the outcome of it may affect the outcome of the election that had been concluded and
that's a good point.
Results declared. So that needs to be done. I think when we were having that discussion, there was even a suggestion that the primary should be concluded. I think they were even considering as long as 6 months or 9 months before the election. But there was also the joke by some of the politicians that will make the elections more expensive for the politician, because if you are known to be a candidate 9 months before the election, then there are lots of interests you'll need to be addressing even before the election. So I don't know finally what they would arrive at.
What about the electronic part of the elections, the voting process and so on?
Yes, when we talk about the electronic voting, I think sometimes people get it mixed up. There's a confusion about what people really mean. Now, people talk about electronic voting. What is doable would be that at the polling unit, you can use a machine. I've seen that happen in some countries. I observed the election in Venezuela, and I saw that happen where there's a machine, you vote with a machine, and your vote goes directly into collation. But even at that, at the end of voting, they still come and cross-check that the result of that, because part of the way it works is that when you vote, it goes electronically, and it also prints out a ballot paper that has shown how you voted,
right,
and you drop it in the ballot box. So they identify about 30% of the voting units that after election they'll have to come and cross-check just to be sure that what goes in electronically is the same. So they cross-check that, and within hours the entire election result is ready and is known. But when people also talk about electronic voting in Nigeria, a lot of people assume that to mean that you can sit in the comfort of your home or wherever and with the phone vote and it goes in there. And what I tell people is that, assuming we're going to do that, to what extent would people accept it if you are told that you can start voting from, say, 7 a.m. till 6 p.m. and then by 9 p.m. we tell you that all the votes have come in and this is how people have voted. When now people have to see the process physically move from point to point, they still dispute it. Is it the one that you are not seeing anything and the result comes out that people will accept? So there's a challenge with that. And also, as there's no way in the world that happens in a general election, that you will vote from somewhere and at the end of the day.
There's nothing that stops Nigeria from leading the innovation.
But we also
there are countries that do these things, or do things, and then we tend to follow.
Definitely, but we also have to realize our peculiarity as Nigerians.
Yes, I understand what you mean.
People have a lot of difficulty trusting a system they are not very sure.
Yeah, nevertheless, the same people are using, virtually everybody in Nigeria is using WhatsApp, and they trust the system. They know it's an encrypted system. They believe that what they send it remains encrypted.
Then the question would be, how many Nigerians can use that system? How many of the people in the rural areas can use that system?
Yeah, no, I understand that. I understand that. But
I mean, we also don't want a situation where it would now become an elite hijack, where the elite who can use the technology will now teleguide the rest of them how to vote, and there will be another problem.
Yeah, I think the issue really is how to give in order to deepen democracy, to give as many people the chance to vote, because there are peculiar problems in Nigeria. There's insecurity. I mean, people get attacked when they go and stand in a queue and so on and so forth. It's a big risk. People even die. So how do you get around that? But I suppose that's a question for another day.
Yeah, and there'll have to be a lot of infrastructural development to take care of such a process.
Well, I want to say you've been a really good guest. Talking to you has been very enlightening, and we appreciate the time you've taken to talk to us. And Obo Effanga is a resident electoral commissioner with the Nigerian Electoral Commission, INEC. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much.
That's it for this edition of the Arise interview. Join us again tomorrow. From me and the entire team here in Abuja and Brussels, bye-bye, and thank you for watching.